to all of you who are joining us this very afternoon to be part of this webinar, which is entitled Belarus After Another Sham Election, the Hijacking of Democracy Continues. This webinar, as you can obviously see, as you know already, is taking place in the framework of REDEMOS, an international research project coordinated here at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, in Trondheim. I'm going to say a few words about this in a second. My name is Tobias Schumacher. I'm a professor of European Studies at NTNU here in Trondheim. I'm a senior professorial fellow at the College of Europe in Natolin in Warsaw. And most important in today's context, I'm the deputy coordinator of REDEMOS. I have the pleasure of being your host today and to moderate this conversation with Andrei Gnyot, who I welcome particularly and who I thank for being part of today's webinar. Before I introduce Andrei in a moment and also make a few introductory remarks myself about today's topic, allow me to just say one or two words about REDEMOS itself, simply because not everyone here might be familiar with our project. REDEMOS, an abbreviation for Reconfiguring EU Democracy Support Towards a Sustained Demos in the EU's Eastern Neighborhood, is an international research project funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program. It runs from the 1st of January 2023 until the end of this year. And under the leadership of my colleague, Dr. Madalina Dobrescu, and myself and our wonderful team here at NTNU in Trondheim, this project brings together a total of 11 European universities, research centers, think tanks, as well as one web solution-oriented, small and medium-sized enterprise. Is a project that is endowed with a budget of 3.7 million euro. And is destined, and that I think is the most important part for you to know, is destined to generate cutting-edge research as well as provide policy advice to the European Union with respect to the EU and EU member states' democracy support efforts in the EU's eastern neighborhood. I should actually add, in a rapidly altering and deteriorating security landscape in Europe. And this brings us directly to today's topic, notably domestic political development in Belarus. And while most parts of today's conversation will revolve around these domestic political developments in Belarus, we will also try, at least towards the end of the conversation, and maybe also drawing on your input, zoom out a little and also discuss the ongoing hardening of autocratic rule in Belarus, also in the context of the regime's subordination to the Kremlin, and by extension in light of Russia's unprovoked war of aggression on Ukraine. As you know, some 5 weeks ago, on the 26th of January, the Lukashenko regime held presidential elections which, as in the past, were neither free nor fair. And unsurprisingly, with a fabricated 86.8% of the presumptive votes, Lukashenko emerged victorious, securing for himself a 7th straight term in an exercise that has been widely considered to be a sham election. For example, EU High Representative Kaja Kallas called the 26th of January, and I quote, a blatant affront to democracy, unquote. And she repeated the point issued by many others in the past that, quote again, Lukashenko has no legitimacy, unquote. I think it is beyond doubt that she is right as far as the latter point is concerned, notably the argument that the Lukashenko regime has absolutely no legitimacy. The 2020 presidential elections had one winner and one winner only, and that is Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya. And the recent elections, as I said, cannot even be considered an election simply because Belarusians were yet again deprived of a real choice. Now, as far as the first point by Callas is concerned, namely that the 26th of January was, as she called it, an affront to democracy, I think it is important to speak truth to the matter. And that is that democracy in Belarus has died already a long time ago as a result of the brutal, utterly repressive, and inhumane actions of an illegitimate regime that is concerned with one thing and one thing only, and that is regime survival. In that sense, and I alluded to that already, it is much more appropriate to state loud and clear that in recent years, the autocratic regime of Alexander Lukashenko has scaled up repression and its dictatorial rule to an extent where nowadays it is determined to further centralize power and secure total control over all aspects of people's lives in Belarus. And in this sense, as was also argued by my colleague Shukura Olovato-Bilaval in a recent REDEMOS blog post, the 2024 parliamentary elections were a first blueprint for what is now unfolding. And the persecution of opposition parties, their respective leaders, their members, or literally anyone critical of the regime is highly unlikely to end anytime soon, I fear. Quite regardless, and I would want to add that, quite regardless of some probable tactical moves on the part of Lukashenko, such as the occasional release of some political prisoners. Now, I don't want to monopolize this, so let me just say one or two more words before I then give the floor to Andrei and our conversation. As Lukashenko is trying to portray himself as the only person that can ensure peace and stability, in his words, and of course considering the rise of fears by large segments of society of further state repression, it is actually quite interesting to observe that recently some pro-democracy forces, both inside and outside Belarus, have to some extent even become divided over how to handle Lukashenko and his shift towards what some consider to be totalitarian rule. It seems as if some members of the domestic opposition seem ready to gradually abandon their reluctance to engage in dialogue with the regime, whereas others, such as the opposition in exile, for instance, continue to reject such an option, warning that this would be exploited by Lukashenko for legitimacy gains. Now, it is these developments and many more that we shall discuss in today's webinar. And once again, I'm particularly grateful to Andrei Gnyot for having accepted our invitation to take part in this conversation. For those of you who may not be familiar with Andrei, let me say that Andrei is a Belarusian journalist, he's a filmmaker, he's a political activist, he's the founder of the Free Association of Athletes, SOS-BY, and in fact, Andrei is a former political prisoner. Andrei, you are zooming in from Warsaw. Let me very warmly welcome you to this conversation, and I mean it when I say that we are very privileged and truly honored to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tobias. Thank you a lot, and thank you for your deep interest in Belarus. Because, sometimes I feel like Belarus is somewhere too far from the focus of our news. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I would like to say again, my name is Andrei Gnyot. And I'm a journalist, I'm film director and political activist from Belarus and ex-political prisoner. Just 4 months ago, I was evacuated in Serbia. So today I would like to share my story But this is a story not just about me, but it's about how dictatorships destroy lives and part of the world just watching and we can do nothing. So I would like that, honestly, I don't want you listen my story just another example of injustice. We have a lot of, but I want it to be a practical guide, a guide that helps us see what actually works and what doesn't. Because in theory, all of us, we believe that democratic systems are capable of stopping dictatorships. But in practice, let's be honest, we see where they fail. And the practice is only one thing that matters. So this what I will say today. This is not my only personal experience. It's about how authoritarian regimes abuse international rules and use organizations like Interpol and take advantage of slow bureaucratic systems in democratic countries to hunt down those who speak the truth. So I'm one of that person who speaks the truth. Honestly, I do believe that democracy is stronger than dictatorship. But what I see is that democracy is slow, because I understand why. We are in democracy, we follow rules and procedures, and dictatorships act fast and without limits.
Mm.
So Lukashenko knows that, Putin, he knows this, and they use it as their advantage against us. So my only one question, the biggest question is, do we understand this and are we ready to respond?
Great, thank you. Maybe picking up on what you said, we could sort of try to approach today's topic precisely by starting to talk about your own personal story at the very beginning, and in that sense, your rather tragic ordeal. Simply because, and I think you're very right in what you were saying, what has been happening to you is inextricably linked to how the regime is operating, how dictatorships are operating by and large. And in that sense, your personal story is quite emblematic of the ruthlessness and brutality of Lukashenko and his aides. As you said yourself, as I said myself, you're Belarusian, you're a political activist, you're a journalist, you're a filmmaker. And in the capacity of you being a filmmaker, you came to Serbia in the autumn of 2023 to shoot a TV commercial for Tele2, a Sweden-based telecommunications company. And literally the day you arrived in Serbia, the Serbian authorities detained you. And they detained you based on an Interpol arrest warrant, a so-called red alert, issued by the Belarusian Interpol Bureau, which takes its orders directly from Lukashenko himself. And I would believe that many of our participants are familiar with your story, while at the same time there are probably many others that are not. Therefore, can you maybe in a few words, at least to the extent that that is possible, tell us a little bit about your own story. What happened next after you were detained, after you had been arrested in Serbia in late October 2023?
Yeah. So let me start from the core. So in autumn 2023, 30 of October, I ended up in a Serbian prison because of a fake arrest warrant issued by Belarus through Interpol. The Lukashenko regime uses international system to hunt political opponents, and honestly, if you even Google that, my case is just one example of that. We have dozens. So when I arrived in Belgrade, I had no idea I was wanted. The Belarusian government had secretly submitted a false Interpol notice accusing me of tax evasion. And this is the very popular article, this very typical tactic of dictatorships to create fake criminal charges to make political persecution look legal. I'm not only one, the Lukashenko regime has used the same tax evasion accusations against many opposition figures and independent journalists. Some very loud examples, like Marina Zolotova and Lyudmila Chekina, the chief editor and CEO of Tut.by. It was the biggest independent internet media in Belarus. So they were sentences to 12 years in prison under similar charges, tax evasions. Just imagine, 12 years, and they are in a jail right now. Viktor Babarika, a former presidential candidate, was arrested and charged with tax evasions along with corruption allegations. Ales Beliatsky, just imagine, who is Ales Beliatsky? It's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, was accused of tax evasions and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Many independent journalists, including editor-in-chief Irina Leushina, were sentenced up to 14 years in prison under tax-related charges. So this is the very typical curtain, and they use this to have political persecution, to hide this. So these cases show how Lukashenko used financial accusations as a cover to silence opposition figures. And the goal of this is very simple: to make political persecution look like a criminal case. When I came to Serbia, I came as a film director to shoot my TV commercial. It was my regular work, and I expected to spend in Serbia just 7 days with small bag, with small luggage. And I spent in Serbia 1 year, 7 months and 6 days in a real prison, in a real jail, and 5 months under house arrest. So I would like to tell you some details, because we're talking about, not about theory, we're talking about practice. And I would like you know how it happens to person and how it's possible to destroy a person, even do not kill this person because of all of this nightmare. So let's go through some details. So at passport control, officers whispered something to each other, and then they just told me, come with us, no any explanations. I was locked in a cramped migrant detention room for 8 hours without food and without water. They proposed me to drink water from toilet. Yeah, it was real conversation with policeman. I asked him for water and he told me, you can go to toilet. I can follow you to toilet and you will drink water from toilet. I asked him, do you drink water from toilet? And he was laughing like, no, of course I'm drinking water from the bottle. Okay, so what I was shocked, of course I was shocked. I heard screams and crying, and I saw people being beaten just on my eyes. The police did that. No one spoke to me. Every time I asked, the answer was wait. So after 8 hours, they put me in handcuffs, took me in a special transport car to a police station like a real criminal. They took my fingerprints, mugshot, and I was still in handcuffs. And they drove me to court at night, 10 p.m. at night, after 12 hours of waiting on all of that procedures. And, I remember everything very clear, but of course, it's a nightmare. For a normal person, it's a nightmare. I've never been even in police station in my life. So only that time was the first time when I heard the reason of my arrest, a fake request from Belarus through Interpol. But I knew and I know that this is fake. But Serbian side doesn't. So the hearing lasted around 40 minutes. My lawyers explained that political prisoners in Belarus are tortured and killed. And you know what judge replied? The judge replied, provide me written proof right now. Give me papers. At night, in a courtroom. Of course, it was an absurd. And after that, she moved me straight to prison. So prison. After court decision, they moved me to central prison in Belgrade. This is the largest prison in the former Yugoslavia. And first they placed me to quarantine room for 24 hours, like dirty, horrible room. And after a day, I was moved to another shared cell. And among my cellmates were people accused of different real crimes. Not for economic violations, but for very serious offenses like murders, drugs, robbers, something like that. During all that time in a jail, I was fighting with health issues, and my requests for medical attention were completely ignored. So no doctors, no help. I had, and I have till now, even worse than before, clinical depression, and I had treatment against this clinical depression. Can you imagine? You have a treatment against clinical depression in a jail. It's not the best place. So this therapy was interrupted 5 times, and it was a kind of torture because it's strictly forbidden to interrupt this kind of very special therapy. 7 months and 6 days I was in prison. But even after that, my suffering in Serbia was not over. After completely enormous efforts from my side, from the lawyer's side, they moved me under house arrest. And at the end, I would like to tell you that, of course, I lost not only my physical and mental health a lot, but I lost all my money, all money of my friends, all money of my family, and all money of my relatives. Because the total cost of this situation already reached around 60,000 euros. And it continues to rise because my story is still not over. That's it. It's if I will speak about it very fast with little bit details.
Andrei, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing with us this deeply personal experience. And obviously what we hear is only the very surface of a much, much larger, as you say yourself, personal, psychological, emotional, mental ordeal, physical ordeal. Let's move then to October 2024. So basically 4 or 5 months ago, eventually you were released thanks to the help of your lawyers, thanks to the massive support that you were lucky to benefit from very well-known artists even, such as Wim Wenders, Pedro Almodovar, Juliette Binoche, and many others. Your case really made it, at least on some occasions, to the front pages of many media outlets. So on the 31st of October, eventually, or late October, you were eventually released. And on the 31st of October last year, you find yourself on board a plane to Berlin, probably thinking that finally you are in safety. As it turned out, only some months later, now, basically January, February this year, this thought, this hope, was misleading. Can you please tell us what happened next after you came Berlin? Why are you no longer in Germany? And from what I understand, I should say to our audience that Andrei and I, we have had plenty of conversations over the past couple of months. You're now in Warsaw, you have filed for international protection, but still, you cannot travel, even though formally and officially Interpol has withdrawn the red alert. Help us understand what happened in the past 4 months after you had been released.
Yeah, let me make a step back and little bit explain how I was released, because it looks like I just was released. No, it was an evacuation. So I was fighting for my life during 1 year, and it was super hard fighting. And I won only because I had international support of everybody, people, politics, even the high-ranked politics like Ursula von der Leyen office, European Parliament, the famous artists, the real just regular people from Belarus, regular Belarusians, many media. So it was not just I was sitting and was waiting. No. I was fighting, and I made incredible pressure to Serbian authorities to make them me released. So I was evacuated on October 31st, 2024. German Deputy Ambassador Carsten Meyer-Wiffhausen personally drove me to airport in his diplomatic car. Can you imagine? Inside of this airport, Serbian special service, I think so. It was a guy from Secret Service. They was waiting for me. They took me to aircraft. So I was landed. Finally, I was landed in Berlin, and I thought like it's over, but in fact it's not, because I arrived in Germany on the visa issued under paragraph 22.2. And this visa meant to evacuate me from Serbia. That's what's the reason of that visa. But the problem was that no one had thought about what would happen next. And I need to explain you that as a journalist, filmmaker, and activist, my work and my life depends on traveling, filming, attending conferences, meeting people, networking. This is a part of my normal, regular life. I don't work in an office. I need the freedom of movement to survive in my profession. And this is only one way how I can earn money, how I can grow in my profession. So, 7th of December 2024, I met with German officials at the Foreign Ministry of Germany, alongside a human rights advocate from Liberia. We was together, and I explained how the Belarusian regime continues its repression even outside the country, using propaganda and threats, because I've got it, because Belarusian propaganda, Lukashenko propaganda, told like, okay, Serbia, it's only one country which didn't use extradition for him, but there are plenty countries all around the world and will still hunt him in other countries. So one day we will arrest him anyway. So I needed international protection, and I needed so-called Geneva passport. And you need
Sorry to interrupt you on this particular point. Maybe for our audience to understand this better, maybe you can just clarify that point so it becomes crystal clear. So Interpol, the moment you were released, had cleared its centralized database, and the red alert was no longer there in the central database.
Yes.
But as a matter of fact, correct me if I'm wrong, there are still plenty of Interpol participating countries, signatory states, that in their respective national database have a red alert issued initially by the Lukashenko regime. Is that correct?
This is correct. You know, I was in shock because in reality, national Interpol offices in different countries update their databases very slowly, manually, or sometimes not at all. So this creates a huge risk. if a country still has my old data, I can be arrested again and repeat all this hell again. So I checked my status in the national Interpol system in Georgia through private sources, not official, because officially it's impossible, completely impossible. And you know what? We realized that my data is still there in Georgia. So if I travel to Georgia today, right today, I would be arrested again for sure, just because their system was not updated. So a month ago, I sent an official request to Interpol asking them to confirm that my data was removed worldwide, but I still haven't received any response.
And obviously, Andrei, I think that's also important for our participants to understand. Arrest might lead to extradition back to Belarus, where
Yeah,
you would then be exposed to the Lukashenko regime.
of course, of course.
Right. So you had that meeting then in the foreign ministry in early December.
Yeah, and I explained the biggest problem for Belarusians, because this is quite unique problem. I need to explain this because I'm pretty sure that audience don't understand what's the problem with our passports. So I would like to explain you how Lukashenko use our passports as a weapon against our people, against me. Let me start from September 2023. Lukashenko signed a decree, the law, stopping Belarusians abroad from renewing or obtaining passport at embassies. So if your passport expires, you must return to Belarus to apply for a new one. No other options. And this is not just bureaucracy, it's a real trap, because he knows exiled Belarusians cannot return without facing arrest, torture, or worse. And at the same time, he knows that Europe won't issue them new passports. Nobody can issue me a new passport. And this leaves people legally stuck, stateless, unable to work, unable to travel, unable to live normally. So this policy affects hundreds of thousands of Belarusians, and honestly, 600,000 officially have already fled since 2020, and unofficial estimates say that it's closer to 1 million. Just imagine 1 million of people in exile. And all these people are at risk of becoming ghost citizens with no documents, no protection, and of course, no future. And now let me speak about this German trap. Nobody expected that. So at the 7th of December, I had this very high-leveled meeting in at the office, the foreign ministry, and I explained my situation. But I've got an answer that legally, because of bureaucracy, it's impossible. So I received the official letter from the German Foreign Ministry, and it said like my visa, according on paragraph 22.2, did not allow me to apply for international protection and Geneva passport. So not because they refused my request, but because it was simply not legally possible from their view. And they had no any ideas how to change my visa to another type, because okay, we are living in Europe, we have strict rules, and some of that rules honestly are really too old. We need to change something, to my opinion. So like only one thing what I expected that time is a refugee camp. And now just imagine this. I would like you to imagine this very clear. After 7 months in prison and 5 months under house arrest, after losing my health, my career, and almost everything I had, I was told that my only path forward was a camp. For me, this wasn't solution. It was a dead end, kept for up to years. And at the same time, I was alone in Berlin with no any financial support, even no health insurance, and no legal way to work. I just want to tell you, I was buying medicine on the black market just to survive, because it was impossible to buy officially in pharmacy. So legally, I could stay in Germany, but in reality, it was impossible, because how could I rebuild my life? How could I work as a journalist or filmmaker? How could I back to my family outside of Germany and, of course, outside of Belarus? So the truth is that Belarusian dictatorship failed to do European bureaucracy does. You know, it erased my career. I mean, not only dictatorship, but all of this situation erased my career, erased my professional achievements, erased my social status. It left me starting not from the zero, but from deep below zero, without a foundation, without resources, without a future. And you have to know that I already survived two forced immigrations, first in 2021 and second in 2022, when Russia started this horrible war. So I had not many options what to do, and I had no choice but to leave. So I left Germany, I came to Poland, and I applied for international protection here. I applied my document in Poland. So for now, I have no my passport. It's forbidden to work here. I cannot work officially because it's forbidden. And I can have very few financial help, around 170 euros per month. And I should wait around 6 months. But also, this is not the end, because there is a Dublin agreement. This is one more trap. I will try to explain you very fast. According to these agreements, the country who issued previous humanitarian visa is responsible on me. So this is not mandatory, but Poland really can say me like that, like, because Germany issued your previous visa, you should go to Germany and ask for protection from Germany. But if I will be deported to Germany, they put me to a refugee camp for sure, without, no any options, only refugee camp up to 2 years. So of course it's not an option. So what I can do now, I just pray to God that Poland will accept my request. And fortunately, I will have my documents, and only that I will start to rebuild my life, to fix all the troubles I have, to glue that pieces which I have now.
Thank you, Andrei. It's very moving to listen to you. I had a chance, obviously, already in the past couple of months to have these exchanges and even hear many, many more details. But already now, as we're in the midst of this webinar, allow me to thank you also on behalf, I guess, of everyone that is zooming in, for sharing with us your personal story. Moving on from precisely this very personal story of yours to Belarus under Lukashenko, to today's Belarus, can you maybe describe to us from your perspective in more detail how you think the regime prepared the recent elections, quote unquote, on the 26th of January? For quite some time, actually. Why did it put so much effort into staging these elections so very carefully? Or let me rephrase maybe, how scared was the regime, in your view, of its own population, of a situation like the one that emerged as of August 2020 after it had rigged the last elections. Can you maybe shed some light on this?
Yes, I would like to share some very direct, practical information about that. First of all, I would like to tell you that these elections were not about democracy or legitimacy. They were only about proving control, just proving control. And Lukashenko needed them to convince himself and his inner circle that he still rules Belarus, because he definitely knows that he doesn't. He rules, but he has no support from our people. And that elections, that was only one purpose. So how he prepared for that? Let's step back. And I would like to tell you that after protests, really historical protests in 2020, a massive wave of repression began in Belarus. Just imagine that more than 50,000 people were arrested in jail, and all of them went through prisons. 50,000 at least. Many were beaten, tortured, given heavy fines, or sentenced to administrative detention. At the same time, people started fleeing the country because it's a real danger. Between 600,000 and 1 million of the most active citizens left Belarus. Politicians, journalists, human rights defenders, business people, athletes, IT specialized activists, scientists, doctors, young students. So the country lost a huge part of its intellectual and social potential. Of course, artists, like me, because I'm half of my personality is artist. So the government continued the tightened control because they was in a total fear, because Lukashenko lost elections in 2020. According to some official documents, he got around 10% of votes. Just 10% of votes. It's almost nothing. Around 80%, up to 80% got Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. So she is real our elected president. Just imagine, 1st of October 2024, the Ministry of Information has restricted access to more than 14,000 websites, which is more than 5,000 websites were labeled as extremist. Okay, do you know that I am extremist? My personal, even my personal Instagram account was labeled in Belarus as extremist. That means that any Belarusian who follows me can be arrested just for that. Imagine that the level of control where the government watched who you follow on social media. So in January 26, 2025, Belarus held its presidential elections, so-called. Really, I cannot say this elections. This is not elections at all. And this elections was 7th for Lukashenko. 7th. But this was not about voting or democracy. It was a fully controlled process used by the regime to show that Lukashenko still holds power. Just to show off that Lukashenko still controls everything. So the preparation for these elections started long before the voting day. The government took every possible step to eliminate surprises. For example, voting booth had no curtains anymore. They left open. No one officially explained why, but the reason was clear. In the past, people could take pictures, photos of their ballots to prove who they voted for. Now they had to vote while being watched in open space. And this created an atmosphere of fear where people understood that the authorities could find out their real choice or they did something wrong. Okay, the next one, because controlling votes was just a part of the system, but honestly, you even don't need to control the votes because you can fake elections at all. Nobody count that votes. It's just a picture. We have no independent media in Belarus now. No one independent media. All newspapers, TV channels, radio stations, magazines are under state control. So Lukashenko's government also tried to control the internet at the same day. And let's talk about election observers. They were known at all. Independent observers were not allowed, and OSCE mission was not even invited. The government knew that if they allowed it international monitors, the fraud would become obvious. So this proves that these elections was not meant for the people, not even for pretending to be democratic. They were only meant to show that Lukashenko controls everything. And at last, there are now over 1,200 political prisoners in Belarus. But the real number is likely higher because not everyone is officially recognized as political prisoner. For example, in my case, my real case, the human rights organization Vesna did not recognize me as a political prisoner just because I was arrested outside of Belarus. And you know, many people so scared to speak about that, so relatives keep silence about someone who was arrested for political reasons. And also, you should know that in 2025, there were no opposition candidates at all. There were 5 candidates in total, and all of them openly supported Lukashenko. Openly. They were either part of the system or people with no real influence. That means Lukashenko was not, it was not competition for him against opponents. He was competing against his own allies. So the entire elections was a started performance created only to show that he is still in the power and only as a confirmation that he can control everything. That's it.
Picking up on this very last point, which you also repeated on 2 occasions, precisely because it's such an important point, namely that this procedure that took place on the 26th of January was first and foremost an attempt to display the power of the regime, that it is consolidated, that it is stable, that it is in full control, leads me to a twofold question. And the first one I would want to ask is, and there's a lot of speculation revolving around this, in particular in the West, how monolithic is the regime as such? I'm asking this question also because arguably there are quite a number of actors, be they in the military, be they in the security services, be they in the administration, that's what we hear, are deeply unhappy and dissatisfied with the regime. Is this the case? And if yes, what is their agency? What is their leverage? What is their room for maneuver, if any, to bring about change?
Yeah, you know, it's quite a bit more complicated than it seems for the first time. So on the surface, Lukashenko's regime looks solid, but inside, of course, there are cracks. Many people in the government, security forces, and administration are unhappy, of course. They see that the country is sinking, the sanctions are crushing the economy, and their own future is uncertain. So some of them whisper about this in private, others just wait for change and just wait and do nothing. But honestly, no one actively fighting against the system because they are a part of that system. And Lukashenko has built a system where no one trusts anyone. It's like in jail. Everyone watches each other and everyone knows that even the smallest sign of disloyalty will be punished immediately. And one of the biggest reasons why the system is not collapsing is a fair and lack of coordination. There is no party system at all, no group loyalty, no organized elite that could act together, because Lukashenko is in power more than 31 years. So during this time, he erased everything. So now the Belarus looks like one big prison, and everyone only thinks about their own safety, and nobody ready to take risk. And also control over the security forces is another key factor. Army, KGB, police are completely controlled by Lukashenko, and he built this system during 31 years. And after 2020, he replaced many officers with people who are 100% loyal to him. And behind each of them, there is, okay, I think there is another layer of control. You can not only lose your job, you can even have just tragic accident, like car accident, if you will start to fight against the whole system. So yeah, from one side, there is frustration inside the system, but no one has power to change it. Even not power. You know, this system is really fragile, like a crystal, like a very thin glass. But Lukashenko just keeps people under fear and control, and no serious rebellion will happen now. If just, and now it's like a balance. If that balance is broken, if someone appears who can unite these unhappy people, then everything could fall apart very quickly, for sure. We know this from the history.
Before I come to the second dimension of the question, or the second question rather, that I wanted to ask, allow me to maybe sort of take a pause here and pick up precisely on the point that you have hammered home now, that the regime is trying to portray itself as stable, as homogeneous, as in charge of everything. Lukashenko himself, he's in his early 70s, he's 72 if I'm not mistaken. There were rumors that he has been ill or that he's suffering from a deteriorating health. There have been rumors that he is somewhat ready to resign, just for him to then again reject that notion that he himself on various occasions fostered. What were to happen, or what will happen rather, if we were to hold the crystal ball in our hands and look into the future, the day Lukashenko disappears? What will happen to this regime? Will it be one of his three sons that eventually will take over? Will there be an infighting emerging among the three sons themselves? Will there be others that have been groomed already into succeeding Lukashenko? Will the regime even collapse? What are your thoughts on this? Would that be maybe also, if I may add that sentence, would that moment be an opportunity for the opposition, the democratic opposition, to rise and coordinate and get its act together?
Yeah, let me explain one real heavy thing. First of all, Lukashenko built a system only for himself. He built a system not for his family, not for his sons or someone else. He built a system just for himself. So if we will remove him, the system will collapse at all. And we should be ready for that. This is the very right question. So what we will do next? And next, we will have big threat from East, from Russia. I would like to speak about real example from 2020, because when we had the protests in 2020, the huge protests, we was just one step to destroy the system. We was so close to that. But Putin acted so fast and he saved Lukashenko in 2020. Let me remind you that in the first days of the Belarusian protests, Moscow was silent. Putin and his inner circle were in shock. They didn't expect such a massive uprising, didn't expect. And the regime, Belarusian regime, was really shaking. And if the West hand, I think so, if the West hand reacted faster, Belarus could have broken free from Russian influence. But that didn't happen. And I think we can expect the repeating of this situation in the future, and we should be prepared for that. Why it happened? It happened in 2020. I can explain you. When it became clear that Lukashenko was losing control, Russia immediately stepped in because Kremlin and Kremlin gave him money, political support, propaganda, even security forces. Russian agents and military advisors started working in Belarus immediately. That's when Lukashenko became Putin's support. Because Putin wanted to use Belarus as a balcony for invasion to Ukraine, as a balcony to start a war with Ukraine, because regime of Putin and Putin personally, he needs Belarus as a territory, as a balcony from the north. You remember how kind of first war has started between Russia and Ukraine. The Russian invasion in 2014 began only from east of Ukraine, and it was not enough. So Putin had a second chance. And it looks like in 2020, he definitely knew that he will have war in 2022 or in the future. That's why he needs Belarus, and that's why Belarus is so important for Europe for security. Because you see, Putin used Belarus for the first time in 2020, and obviously he will use Belarus again if he would like to have a big war, unfortunately, in Europe. We should speak about it because we have this big risk. And I would like to tell you that, I would like to finish like, if that time we could stop Lukashenko, and if that time we changed the system, I think this horrible war never began.
I would like to come back to this point in a moment, Andrei, in particular with respect to the announced military exercise, the Support exercise that the Kremlin has already announced to take place in the summer of this year. But I want to do that in a moment, and then also, of course, relate that back to what is happening inside Belarus. But before I do that, I would want to then, and in a way, what you have been telling us gives me the kind of ground to finally raise that second part of this twofold question that I had mentioned. And that is the whole control element for Lukashenko to use these sham elections to demonstrate that the regime is in control. And I asked about how monolithic is the regime, how homogeneous is it? But the other dimension of that question is, to what extent is Lukashenko himself still in control of his own very regime? Obviously, as you rightly pointed out, Russia has expanded its influence in and over Belarus massively over the past 4.5 years. The question, therefore, is what is the actual room for maneuver of Lukashenko himself? And by the same time, how does this pervasive presence and influence of Russia constrain the potential leverage of those within Belarus, as well as outside, that want to see change?
Yeah, honestly, Lukashenko has no room for any movements now. Honestly, it looks like he lost this game, and he tried to play with West, and now we see that United States try to play with Lukashenko some games, because around 10 days ago, there was a secret visit from United States administration to Belarus, and it was, from one side, it was nice because some of political prisoners was released, thanks God. But from another side, they started like secret negotiations with regime to try to give the regime this room for movings from between East and West, as usual Lukashenko did. He played, we said that he was seated on two chairs, at West chair and then East chair. But now he's fully depends on Russia and Russian help and Russian money, and he falls down in this deeper and deeper. And this what we are. I mean, we are Belarusians. We are worried about. We are worried about our independence, because now our country looks like a colony of Russia. Looks like a colony. Our country is still no more real independent, because we have no real independence, no political independence, no economical independence. We depend on Russia, and this how situation looks like. So I cannot come inside of head of Lukashenko, of course. I cannot check his thoughts, I cannot check his brain, but it looks like he has no more options. He has no any options except of Russia and Putin, and try to balance with him. But it's very difficult to balance. You know that now even our telecommunication company, mobile operator, they cancel the roaming between the countries. Like, it looks like we are the one country, Belarus and Russia. They say this is our union between Belarus and Russia. Looks like they said like, okay, but you have no roaming in European Union. What's the problem? But the problem is much more deeper, not about roaming. The problem is that Putin try to make Belarus just not like a country, but change our country just to a region of Russia, just a part of Russia. And sometimes I hear and I see that European politics say, okay, don't touch him. Let him catch this country. Let him use this country. Belarus, it's not a big deal. It's just a small country in Europe, population less than 9 millions. So this is his territory and he can play with this territory. No, sorry, no. This is the very dangerous game because he started to play with our territory in 2020 and in 2022 he started a war. So what he will do, I mean Putin, what he will do next.
Andrei, we have some 7 minutes left, and there are a couple of questions coming from our participants. I myself have 1 or 2 left myself. So asking you to be very, very brief, I would like to bring these questions in, or at least some of them, in particular those that are related to one another. So there is one by my colleague Arusiak Alexandyan from Yerevan, as a matter of fact, who's asking what strategies remain for Belarusians inside the country to resist the regime then, in light of everything that you have been saying. And the other comes from my colleague Ragnar Weiland, who is actually working with us here at NTNU in the context of REDEMOS, who's asking, well, what should the West have done differently then in 2021? And if I may add, as of 2022, the moment Russia started its invasion of Ukraine, and if I were to add a third element, then what can the European Union, as such, do in order to help democracy-minded reform actors inside and outside Belarus, given everything that you say? So what are the strategies? What's the room for maneuver of Belarusians inside the country? What could the West have done differently? And what could the EU do, if anything at all?
Okay, let's speak about people inside of Belarus. It's very tough question because honestly, people inside Belarus have nothing to do. I can explain you why. Can you imagine yourself in jail? What can you do in jail in front of police with weapon? What can you do in jail when you are arrested? Okay, you can make some rally or some protest action, and what will happen next? You will be tortured and you will be arrested even more and you will have more sentence, and the government will just change a prison administration to tight everything more. So the only one strategy for people who's inside of Belarus is to survive somehow, because economical situation is horrible, and people have salary in the big cities up to 400 or 500 euros at least, but it's only in Minsk. But in the small cities and the villages, they have salary, they have fee monthly around 200 euros. So how can you fight against dictatorship when you even have no money for food or something like that? So people just thinking about survival and about security, because every day we have news that people arrested for something, just for subscription to forbidden news channel in your mobile phone. Do you know that even when you walk on the street, police can come to you and can check your mobile phone anytime? Some of my friends, I still connected with some of my friends in Belarus, and one of my friend, she was arrested at the border 1 month ago, and she was in jail just because she met me in Berlin. And nobody knows how dictatorship knew about it. Maybe it was searching about me, maybe they had some agent, but she was arrested, and probably because of me. They made this, I mean Secret Service, they took her phone and made a subscription to some extremist Instagram channel. Just this, and they put her to jail. So in this condition, people can do nothing, just to wait and survive. From another side, we have a power abroad. We have a power outside of Belarus. And I would like to tell you that European Union is already doing a lot to support the Belarusian opposition. Sanctions, aid programs for civil society, funding for independent media. But when you look at it from the perspective of real experience, I can realize that there are a huge gap between official statements and actual supports. I can explain you on the real things. Just an example. Independent media. Everyone understands that information is a weapon, of course. The EU allocated 1 million to support Belarusian independent media. That sounds like a big number, 1 million every year, until you learn that Russia spends 3.86 million on propaganda every single day. Just think about that European Union gave Belarusian media as much money as the Kremlin spends on propaganda just in 6 hours. So how can you compare when one side has unlimited resources and the other side gets crumbs? And also the biggest problem, what can we, when I say we, I mean European society. The biggest problem is the fate of real people, the people who fought against dictatorship and who are now just fighting to survive. Because I know this from my personal experience. Let me speak about myself again, because this is the good example how it works. When I stood up against Lukashenko, I knew that I was taking a risk, of course. I'm not stupid. And I was prepared for persecution, for threats, but I wasn't prepared for the fact that my biggest battle would become not for freedom, but for my basic survival here in Europe. I spent 7 months in prison, 5 months under house arrest. I lost everything, 60,000 euros gone just to defend myself and stay alive. I was located in Germany, and what? I realized that my case didn't fit into this system, and I cannot apply for protection. I couldn't legalize my status. I couldn't have even proper health insurance. So this is not just my story. This is happening to hundreds of Belarusians who were forced to flee but received no real help. And they are left to survive on their own, struggling to afford food, finding illegal ways to work, even like this. How can you keep fighting in these conditions? How you can even live and survive? So we need to think. We need to think, and we need to not only think, but to do. Because, while we are thinking, they are on East, they are doing. So the West talks about supporting democracy. That's good. But in reality, dictatorship destroys people not only physically, but they try to destroy the people with bureaucracy and destroy them morally. And European Union needs to stop acting slowly. We need to wake up. We need to change it immediately. I think everybody see now what happens all around. And we need to understand that Belarusians who fight against the regime are not just abstract victims. They are the real people who needs a real help. I mean, just support, but real support, not just say some concerns. We have a lot of jokes about concerns. So we don't just need to survive. We need to live, work, and this is the part of our fighting, because we need to continue to fight, because we need to free our country from dictatorship. We need to back our country to our people. And for that, the whole bureaucratic system in Europe needs to change. I'm serious. The EU needs to create mechanism that actually help people, not just look good in report, and act fast and brave. This is very important.
Andrei, we have exhausted our time, and I understand everyone is busy, and I fully appreciate that, of course. I would, however, abuse my position as the moderator of this conversation to read out one more question and ask you to be truly concise and not spend more than 1 minute, if possible, on that, so we can draw this conversation to a close. And this question comes from Tatiana Gabrichuk, who says, greetings from Indiana University, Bloomington. My question is, what is your perspective on the future policies regarding Belarusians in exile? And I would want to add Belarusians in Belarus as well, considering the current attitude of the US government towards Russia and the EU's reaction on it. Would you feel comfortable engaging with this just for a few more seconds before we draw this conversation to a close?
I can say very short. We are frightened a lot because it looks like we are in a big trouble now. And also, I had a question from the chat very fast. I need to ask, because it's super important question. That do you think that Belarusian democratic opposition needs a reform, a new leader? What can the opposition do to fight the Belarus fatigue in Europe?
Yes.
Yeah, we have this so-called Belarus fatigue in Europe, and of course, we need to reform something, but not to destroy. We still have our leader. It's our officially elected president, and because we have no any more elections, we need to work with that what we have. But of course, we need to reform something, on my deep opinion, because some people really forget why we started our protest in 2020, unfortunately. But it's not very common. Of course, it's like a part of the process. It's normal when we need to reform something during 5 years.
Thank you, Andrei. Thank you very much. As I said before, we have to, unfortunately, I would want to add, draw this conversation to a close. And even though it was not just moving, in particular during the first 30 minutes, to listen to your own personal story, Andrei, and even though it was quite sobering more generally, I think it was extremely thought-provoking, interesting, and very comprehensive, of course, also very timely. And I would once again like to thank you very much, Andrei, for having been with us and for having been so frank and straightforward. I would also want to thank all our participants for having zoomed in, for bearing with me as the moderator, and in that sense, the one that is in charge of this, for being 6 minutes over our envisaged time slot. Should you want to learn more about REDEMOS, what we do, and by extension, our work on Belarus, please consult our website, subscribe to our newsletter, check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and other social media. Once again, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on board one of our other upcoming webinars in the future. Take all good care. Thank you very much once again, and have a good continuation of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Keep fighting and stay strong.
Thank you. Bye-bye.